Good morning. So today, what are we talking about? Hello? Hello? Can you hear me? Ceci here. Is anyone there? Hi, my name is Ceci. I'm based in Berlin, and I want to welcome you to Ceci, the podcast where you see what others see. In this, our first season, we're talking about colors. This is an exciting yet a complex episode in which we will try to understand the implications of color for children, teenagers, and young adults in the autism spectrum. For that purpose, I will be co-hosting this episode with Petra van Velen. Hello, Petra. Good morning.
Hello, Ceci. Happy to be here. Indeed, an interesting episode ahead of us. And before presenting our guest today, I would like to remind our audience that this episode is intended for awareness and longs for understanding and empathy for children in the autistic spectrum. The contents of this program are not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Regarding color and light perception, our theme today, it is important that you speak with your healthcare provider or child's pediatrician about how to treat him or her, as just as each person may have a different visual experience or trigger for light sensitivity, and different treatments may be recommended. That all said, let's get started. Our guest today has 20 years of experience in treatment and research in various areas such as child development, autism, and sensory processing, among others. She currently collaborates with several institutes and research groups. She completed the Sensory Processing Fellowship at the STAR Institute in Denver, Colorado, and was part of Carol S. Granowitz-Brook project, The Out of Sync Child Grows Up. She was coordinator of the Department of School Integration in the Mexican Clinic for Autism and currently works as an academic coordinator of Educasa Mexico. In her private practice, she focuses on children, teenagers, and young adults with sensory processing disorders and autism spectrum disorders. She herself is autistic. Our guest today is Marlene Gómez Aizpuru. Welcome, Marlene. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me here.
Marlene, for those who do not know, in simple words, what is autism spectrum disorder?
Okay, the autism spectrum disorder is, as you just said, a disorder. A disorder basically means a group of symptoms that it's impairing normal functioning. So the group of symptoms that we have for the autism spectrum disorder are 4. The main 3 ones are social interaction impairments, communication difficulties, atypical behaviors, and the 4th, which is the one that we're going to be talking about, is impaired or different processing in sensation. And it's basically, imagine that you are cooking a brain and you add all of those 4 ingredients. You don't have a recipe, so you're adding just a little of this and a little bit of that, and maybe a lot of impairment in communication, but not as bad social interaction, but still altered. And that is why every person within the spectrum is a little bit different, because there is not an actual recipe. It just gets a little bit of each category, with the category 1, the social interaction impairments, being the one that you definitely have to have.
Autistic children perceive and think differently than the norm children, also called neurotypical children. What did recent studies show in particular concerning color preference among children with ASD? And in general, in the variety of the spectrum, which would be the most typical ways for children with ASD to perceive color?
It's such an interesting thing because there are many different anecdotal stories about how people in the spectrum perceive the colors, but there's actually very little research done in it. And the few researchers who have investigated the topic found sometimes very opposite results. One of them is that there is an actual difficulty in perceiving color and reacting quickly to it, while on the other side, there's people who say, oh, they're actually super good at perceiving color. But what can explain this is, again, that variety, that's why we call it a spectrum, where sometimes you're a little bit hyperactive to the stimulus. So you see the green and the green goes like, wow, it's so beautiful, and just goes in and you are totally absorbed in the green. And then you see the yellow and it's like, oh, it hurts my eyes. It's going to kill me. I hate yellow. So it's very extreme when you have a hyperreactive kid. But you might as well have a hyperreactive kid who is holding a super bright orange lamp to his eyes because he's looking for that stimuli in order to feel it and to actually pass that barrier of the brain that we call the threshold, the sensory threshold. And there's another category of people who are actually sort of addicts to color or to light or to visual stimuli. And these people are like, they will look for the stimuli, the color that they like, and they get more disorganized. So I look into that blue that I like and I get very excited. And so I want to look at more blue and I'm going to get more excited. So I end up even saturating myself. And then there's a last category, which is the people who have problems noting the difference between one color and the other, and this is perceptual. But the one that is studied the most and the one that we see the most is actually the hyperreactive part.
As we were hearing, and you were mentioning, Marlene, autistic children might have an over-responsiveness or under-responsiveness to a wide range of stimuli, or even a combination of both. What I found in my research is that these stimuli refer to sights, sounds, smell, taste, touch, balance, awareness of body position of movement, and even internal body cues and sensations.
Exactly. It can touch all the realms of sensation, and it can be very particular to each person in the spectrum.
So regarding colors, many autistic people experience hypersensitivity to bright lights, and certain lights like fluorescence or LED lights. How is luminosity related to autism's hypersensitivity?
Actually, luminosity indeed seems to be the key. In research, we have found that people in the spectrum tend to prefer softer color, especially in luminosity, and lovely hues, but not as bright, and saturation in the midpoint. So blue, green, soft browns are like the preferred ones when you take a larger sample. And that's my case as well. I like softer hues and softer blues and greens.
Visually, in terms of light and color perception, and following the fact that brighter, spicier colors might perhaps trigger more excitement, would it be fair to say that for the contrary, calm palettes like pastel colors might be able to provide a peace of mind?
Yes, that's one area that is very interesting to look into. And there's a gorgeous work from a firm called GA Architects that even proposed a whole methodology on how to design environments for people in the spectrum. And what I like of this one is that they actually included the kids in the spectrum.
That is exactly what I wanted to ask you, Marlene. You hit the point. Regarding what you were saying, color-wise speaking, what do you recommend when considering creating a certain space for an autistic child?
Well, what they researched was a large sample of colors considering all these criteria that we just talked about, like hue, luminosity, and saturation of color, and proposed around 32 colors. And from those, they passed them to teachers and to kids in the spectrum to look for the preferred colors. And I actually found something very different, not different, how do you say it? Very special. Because in other architectural works, they have proposed that light purple would be a very good option. And actually, the purple was taken out by the people in the spectrum. And I totally understood that because when I was seeing, I was like, no, that's horrible. Take it off. So what they did is out of those, they selected a few colors, and they were very light hue and saturation and luminosity, greens, blues, browns, a little bit of gray. And those are the low arousal color, let's call it like that. And they recommend that they are painted in a more general way, like not one wall, one color, one wall, the other color, but the whole floor in one color, the whole walls in one color, thus generating a more clear perception on what the floor is and what the wall is, and not creating general things. Because one part of the problem is that sometimes we don't have the get what it's called the habituation, right? So you don't get used to stimuli. So every time you look at that blue is all bright and new again.
Oh, so it's always new.
Exactly. So if one wall is blue and the other one is green, every time you turn around, it's wow, blue, wow, green, and you're getting distracted. So it's recommended to have one color. The other thing, it's including the furnishing. The furnishing should be like certain colors, and the lights in preference should be natural or non-fluorescent warm lights, so they don't create more intense patterns in the colors that we were saying. And the only thing that we need to understand, and will be very interesting, is that you actually then can use very bright colors for the materials you want the kids to focus in. So you have a very muted, very calm, very relaxing environment. And then whatever I have to work with is the one thing that is red. So then my brain, it goes like, oh, red. Actually, that's the one red thing. I might pay attention to it.
Regarding the preference of kids with ASD, is it correct to assume that colors very present in nature, like browns and greens, highlight the importance of nature for their well-being?
I am not sure if I can make that jump from the color to the theory to the whole first thing. Of course, nature is one of the places where we recommend to spend time. And obviously, the colors are colors that will make you very relaxed. And it comes out, your question is actually very interesting, because it brings out one key thing that I think in the spectrum we might consider, is that actually those calm colors that you just mentioned, the browns and the greens and the blues, are what in nature you tend to feel that are not threatening. While those bright yellows, those bright reds, oranges might be poisonous animals, things I should not be close to. So it might go even further than that and be something that is very primordial and that is still very fresh with us. But of course, every time that we can go to nature might be better if the child feels better in nature. You have to read and understand and respect what their preferences are.
Marlene, I have a question. What would a normal day be visually perceived by a child in the autism spectrum? But for that, if it's okay with you, we would like to do a dynamic. Let's imagine that all of us listening is a child in the autistic spectrum. We're leaving home in the morning and we're ready to start our day outside. We experience a lot, but are not able to express the way we feel. You, Marlene, take us by the hand, and following your experience as an autistic person yourself, you will become our voice today. Now remember, this is a normal, average day.
Yeah.
Could you express in the simplest way possible which stimuli do you see, feel, and hear, and how do you perceive them?
Okay. A normal day starts with the particular range of light color of that day. So if the day is really sunny and it's one of those mornings where everything starts orange and softer, you might get very energetic when you wake up. So even from the very, very beginning, before you hit the door, you're already energized. But if you're hyper energized and then you were in a very dark room and suddenly everybody opens the doors and the light just comes in, it might be too much. So then everything will start in a pattern of being hyperstimulated. And if your parents chose very bright colors for you to wear that day, that might increase it. And you might start to be very difficult to dress and be very fast, and you will not, and then you will be entertained by the cereal because the cereal is blue or it has colors, and you will be very distracted. So that even though it looks like a nice day, you might already have a lot of trouble focusing, and everybody might be demanding for you to be faster, and you're actually just so entertained by the colors and the light and the richness. Well, if it was a cold day with cold light, you might go the whole other way and wake up like this, like, I don't have any energy and I don't want to go anywhere. And okay, I'm going to dress me. You can imagine if it happens to typical people, what happens when you're in that extreme, it might totally throw you down. And then, all those things can alter you. And even because you have this preference for colors. So if your mom puts something that you don't want to wear because it's not the blue that you wanted to wear today, you might fight it, and you might fight it to death. And that might start your day already in a very irritated way. So color, it might seem like it's not important, but it's actually already setting the mood for the rest of the day.
What about the traffic, Marlene? How do you perceive it?
A nightmare. Especially here in Mexico, where the police cars are always with their lights on, turning around. They're so bright and blue red. So it might drive you, again, a little bit hyper. And if you include to the colors, the sounds, the movement, the hurrying, the klaxons, like all that can drive you to extreme. So it's already 8 p.m. and you're about to go to school, and you are already as if you were feeling in a battleship. There's actually a gorgeous video on YouTube that every parent can look for. That is the experience of a kid in the spectrum in black and white with little colors to make you feel what the kid feels.
Nowadays, can color be used as a diagnostic tool?
Not right now. We cannot use color as a diagnostic tool. It would be very interesting if in the future it could be seen something like a baby looking at a color and we could read the brain and see where it goes and the pattern that it follows. But right now that would be so prohibitively expensive that it's not possible to do it. And I know, and I cannot be sure if it would be a unique characteristic of the spectrum or anyone with sensory processing disorder might share it as well. But indeed, early diagnosis is central for the kid's well-being. And in order for the symptoms of the spectrum to be more adaptive and for us to have less problems in functionality in the world. So maybe there will be a future where we'll be able to be done, but not yet, sadly.
We know how important an early diagnosis is in general for anything. Now, could you give us some examples of red flags regarding behavior in the early years that should wake up our awareness?
Yes, absolutely. Eye contact it's one of the central, and since a baby is very, very young, we're looking for the quality of eye contact, not only if it has or doesn't have it, but how long it's sustained. The richness of the connection of the eye contact is central. Also, the smiling back to us. The pointing of the finger is one key. And this is very hard to explain for the people who cannot see us. But what happens is that the kid points to something that wants to share with his loved one, but not only points to it, he looks back at that loved one, shares the joy, and looks back at the object. That 3-point sharing is key in separating very early kids that might be on the spectrum and need more testing from the kids that aren't. There's also body positioning, and a baby that feels comfortable with mom will lean into her, and the whole body will be like almost molding to the mom. While some kids with sensory processing disorder, and then including kids in the spectrum, might get all reactive to the touch and tense their backs and pull away from the other person's body. That is also another signal that we can consider important, and we could tell the pediatrician in order for us to get earlier diagnosis.
Marlene, perhaps not as color alone, but color as means of expression. Let's say the application of color by using art as a therapy. Have you had good results applying art and color as a way of expression and therapy?
Absolutely. I myself don't work in it, but a beautiful foundation here in Mexico City has a program where kids start a painting with their art teacher, and that painting is then taken to a famous artist in Mexico, and they finish the painting, and that painting gets auctioned every year. I actually have 2 of those. And they are beautiful artworks with a lot of color, a lot of joy in them, and strength. There's a lot of strength in their work as well. And they really love it. And it becomes a more functional way of sustaining the foundation and also creating a space where the whole community works. They did a long mural with a French artist in collaboration. And in the wall outside, it's, I think, 40 meters long. And the kids did the fishes and we will be painting outside in the wall. That one I helped with, and it was gorgeous, and they were quite happy.
Could you give us an example regarding color preference of children with ASD and its use as a treatment tool?
Yes, there are some treatment tools that have been developed surrounding color. One of them is using color filters, and I indeed work with that. We would turn the light a little bit off, and we'll use red screens at very soft plastic in order to change the pattern of the colors for the kid to not look at a very bright white page, for him to read and decode better. There's also grading in their schoolwork using colors to mark different things. Depending on the skill of the kid, an example is a kid that is already able to grade his own work, might use red to find the things that he did not like about his own handwriting, then blue about the things that he did like to create that perception, that difference between what I like and what I don't like, and then working back. There's also pointing in one color where he should begin the phrase and with another color where he should end. So it can be used in many, many different ways and adaptations. And we can use each kid's preference, because even though we have a pattern of liking blues and greens and red, there are kids in the spectrum who like who like blues, greens, and browns. There are kids that like red. And then we need to use red in their adaptations and educations of material.
Could bright or primary colors be used as a tool for teaching autistic children?
Yes, but again, those need to be more limited to the things we really want the eye to suddenly detect and say like, oh, yes, I have to pay attention on that. And a good therapy environment sometimes, sadly, has a lot of primary colors because that's what the providers sell to people. And many of the therapists are neurotypical, so they think bright colors are actually quite fun. So they tend to make their rooms super loud. When we designed a room here in Mexico, it's actually very muted. It was light wooden floors, only green as an accent. The walls were a very muted beige that was very pleasant, and the colors were indirect, warm lights that had dimmers, so we could control the amount of light. And most of the light was daylight. And it did work in helping kids focus better and feel less overstimulated.
Knowing already what we have learned today, if you now enter any school, and I'll be in the spectrum, I will for sure feel overwhelmed by all the different range of bright colors used for teaching purposes. I mean, you have posters, LED lights, and so on. In this sense, for those parents or caregivers that cannot afford monetarily to provide an autistic child with a learning environment suited for him or her, what would you recommend? How can a caregiver help an autistic child deal with an overstimulated environment?
There are many ways. We have strategies that we call bottom-down strategies, which are basically creating awareness in the brain so we can control the body better. And we have strategies that are bottom-top, which are creating work with the body so the brain can regulate the stimuli better. The bottom-down techniques can be used with help of the teachers. So if we live in a country where we can access an individualized educational profile, it could be a very good tool to work with the teachers and the school counselors. Even some schools now have OTs in order to adapt the school better. If when that doesn't happen, what we can do as well is go into those bottom top strategies where we actually use our proprioception, the sensation of our muscles, to block the nauseous stimuli. So we can do exercises like we can teach the kid to do pressure in the joints so the stimuli doesn't come as strong. It's a little bit hard to explain why this works because you can understand it this way. If there was a traffic coming in one direction and the muscle comes totally in the other, you have to let the muscle information pass so the visual will not be able to pass so much. So it's that's a little bit way of explaining it. So we can have also heavy blankets that give deep tactile stimuli. That can also work as a blocker. We can have glasses that have filters with a special, but this has to be tailored to each kid again. We can work on placing the kid away from very distracting colors and maybe looking into a window that might be with nature or a space in the classroom that is more muted. There are several options, but they all need a little bit of tailoring because each classroom is different and each kid might react to different color.
Marlene, as you grew up, how did you learn to live with the hyper or hyposensitivity to stimuli? How was the development from child to teenager, from teenager to young adult and to adulthood. What would you say today would be essential to ease as much as possible this stimuli reception and to help process them and achieve a positive result?
I was very lucky growing up because I grew up in a part of Mexico that is basically a desert in front of a beach that has soft pink mountains and soft green cactus and blue skies. So it in itself was a very color pleasant place, and the weather was almost always the same. So sensory-wise, it was very easy for me. And I went to a school where they were very accommodating to my needs. But as I changed to Mexico City, that's when I realized the complete difference because Mexico City is loud. We cannot describe it any other way. It's loud in color, loud in noise, loud in movement. And it was very, very hard adapting. And even if in Baja I had been a terrible, naughty child, once I got to Mexico, I was like so out of my way and so confused that many things were very hard to adapt to. And at that time, I didn't have a diagnosis. We knew something was different, but we didn't know why. Because at that time, women in the spectrum were not diagnosed because we have difference from boys. And even then, diagnosing boys was really odd in the late 80s, late 70s, early 80s. So as you grow older, you do not understand what's going on because you are very sensitive and very reactive. And sometimes people will call you dramatic or too wired and that you need to calm down. And you go like, yeah, why is everybody calming down? And I'm like, this about this little thing that is maybe the sound of a teacher talking, or I'm trying to pay attention in the classroom and some other girls are talking about gossip behind me and I just cannot focus because I cannot tune out both of the stimuli. And now that we know, what we can give is that person awareness of what the situation is and tell these students, this is what you're experiencing is normal and the ways that you can fix it or try to tone it down is this, and that. So it's not what's wrong with you, it's what's different and why that difference might not make the space that was designed for neurotypicals easy for you.
Blue is the color chosen for autism awareness. Do you like blue?
I love blue. It's my favorite color. My whole house is almost blue. My nails are blue today.
Well, now take a couple of seconds to think, what would you say to any autistic or neurotypical child, teenager, or young adult growing up in the age of computers, consumerism, and hyper-stimulated environments?
I would tell the people in the spectrum what I tell a lot of my clients. Evolution is not stupid. And there's a reason why some traits come again and again and come more. And our sensitivity might make life sometimes hard for us, but with all the new therapies and things that are coming up, when we work out those kinks, we can actually use that sensitivity in our lives to become better professionals. And we can actually tell a lot of people how to avoid being overstimulated because we know and we try all the time. You're overstimulated by the phone, then why don't you try all these options? And instead of looking at it like something that it's always hurtful, even though sometimes is, we can look at it as something that might make you very successful in life if we know how to hone them correctly.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Marlene, for your time. This was a vibrant and brilliant interview.
I really enjoyed talking about the experience of color.
Thank you, Marlene. Thank you, Ceci. If anyone listening would like to consult Marlene, please be sure to check all the information in the episode's description.
Thank you, Petra, and thank you, our listeners, wherever you are, for having allowed us to share time with you. We will see you next time. Have a good one.